we have a leaked 200-page policy document that Reuters has leaked about Meta's AI behavior standards. Unfortunately, this document included guidance that Meta was explicitly permitting bots to engage in romantic or sensual chats with minors, so long as they did not cross into explicit sexual territory. So Reuters has this exclusive kind of deep dive into this leaked document. And basically, this document has some pretty tough stuff in it, but it discusses basically the standards that guide Meta's generative AI assistant, Meta AI, and the chatbots that you can use on Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. So this is not out of the ordinary to have documents like this. This is a guide for Meta staff and contractors, basically, on what they should, quote, treat as acceptable chatbot behaviors when building and training the company's generative AI products. That's according to Reuters. But where it gets tough is that some of these are just really controversial. So they said, quote, it is acceptable to describe a child in terms that evidence their attractiveness, according to the document, but it draws the line explicitly at describing a child under 13 in terms that they indicate are sexually desirable. Now, that rule has since been scrubbed, according to Meta, but it was not the only one that Reuters flagged as very concerning. The same document also allowed bots to argue basically that certain races are inferior as long as the response avoided dehumanizing language. Meta claims these examples were, quote, erroneous and, quote, inconsistent with its policies. Yet this document was reviewed and approved by the company's legal team, policy team, engineering team, and, interestingly, its chief ethicist. Now, the document also okayed generating false medical claims or sexually suggestive images of public figures, provided disclaimers were attached or that visual content stayed just absurd enough that you would know it's not like actually real. The company says it's revising the guidelines, but the fact these rules were in place at all at any point is raising some pretty serious questions. So, Paul, this is definitely a really tough topic to research and discuss. Every AI company out there, it should be said, has to make decisions about how humans can and can't interact with their models. I'm sure there's a lot of tough stuff being discussed and seen in these training data sets that humans, we talked about humans having to label that data, but I don't know, just something about this seems to go out of bounds in some very worrying ways. And I'm wondering if you could maybe put this in context for us and kind of talk through what's worth paying attention to here beyond kind of the sensational headline.
Yeah, these are very uncomfortable conversations, honestly. So, I mean, I've said before, I have a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old. They're not on social media and hopefully will not be for a number of years here. Um, Meta has a lot of users across Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, and they affect a lot of people. It's a primary communications channel. It's a primary information gathering channel. And so it's an influential company. Now, on the corporate side, this isn't necessarily affecting any of us or many of us from a business user perspective. I mean, we use these social channels to promote our companies and things like that, but we're not building their agents into our workflows. It's not kind of like Microsoft and Google. But it still has a massive impact, especially, if you're a B2C company and you're, dependent upon these channels to communicate with these audiences. So I think it's extremely important that people understand what's going on and what the motivations of these companies are. I mean, Meta is one of the 5 major frontier model companies that, is going to play a very big role in where we go from here. So I don't know. I went into Facebook. I don't use Facebook very often. I went in there. I don't have access to these characters through Facebook. I didn't like, I don't even know how you would do it, honestly. And so then I went into Instagram. I didn't see it there, but then I just did a search and I found they have aistudio.instagram.com. You can go to and actually like look at the different characters that they're creating that people would be able to interact with. Because I had seen a tweet, I think it was over the weekend, from Joanne Zhang from OpenAI, and she had shared a post that showed, what was it? We had Russian girl who obviously,
These are AI characters you can
yes, an
chat
AI
with. Yeah.
character, Russian girl is a Facebook character, 5.1 million messages, and then, and definitely a teen, and then Russian, or no, this stepmom which was 3.3 million. And so she reshared this post that someone had put up, oh man, this is nasty. Is this AI stepmom what Zuck meant by personal superintelligence? And so Joanne's post that I thought was important was, she said, I think everyone in AI should think about what their quote unquote line is. Where if your company knowingly crosses that line and won't walk it back, you'll walk away. This line is personal, will be different for everyone, and can feel far-fetched even. You don't have to share it with anyone, but I recommend writing it down as an anchor for your future self, inspired by two people I deeply respect who just did from different labs. So she, as an AI researcher working within one of these labs, is basically saying the companies we work for are going to make choices. Some of these choices are going to be counter to your own ethics, morals, principles, and you have to know where the line is when you're going to walk away. And so the Reuters article, Mike, that you mentioned, I would recommend people read it. Again, it's like this is harder stuff to like think about. It's easier to go through your life and be ignorant to this stuff. Trust me, like I try sometimes. But it talks about this being built into their AI assistants, Meta AI, the chatbots within Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. Meta did confirm the authenticity. The company, as Mike mentioned, removed portions which stated it is permissible for the chatbot to flirt and engage in romantic role play with children, meaning it was allowed, it was permissible. Meta's spokesperson, Andy Stone, said the company is in the process of revising the document and that such conversations with children never should have been allowed. Keep in mind, some human wrote these in there. And then a bunch of other humans with the authority to remove them and say this is not our policy chose to allow them to stay in it. So we can remove it now and we can say, hey, it shouldn't have been in there, but it was. And people in power at Meta made the decisions to allow these things to remain. They had an interesting perspective from a professor at Stanford Law School who studies tech company regulations of speech. And I thought this was a fascinating perspective. So there's a lot of unsettled legal and ethical questions surrounding generative AI content. She said she was puzzled that the company would allow bots to generate some of the material deemed as acceptable in the document, such as passages on race and intelligence. But she said there's a distinction between a platform allowing a user to post troubling content and then producing that material itself. So Meta, as the builder, in theory, of these AI characters, allowing those characters, which is an extension of Meta, to create things that are ethically, legally questionable. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is like from a legal perspective where this all goes. But they very quickly heard from the U.S. government. So Senator Josh Hawley said he is launching an investigation into Meta to find out whether Meta's generative AI products enable exploitation, deception, and other criminal harms to children, and whether Meta misled the public or regulators about its safeguards. Hawley called on CEO Mark Zuckerberg to preserve relevant materials, including any emails that discussed all this, and said that Meta must produce documents about its generative AI-related content risks and standard lists of every product that adheres to those policies and other safety and incident reports. So I don't know. I mean, this kind of goes back to, I think it was episode 161. I think this was just last week when I was talking about this. Maybe it was 160. That people have to understand, like, there's humans at every aspect of this. Like, yes, we're building these AI models and they're kind of like alien intelligence, and we're not even really sure exactly what they're capable of or why they're really able to do what they do. That being said, there's humans in the loop at every step of this, like the data that goes into train them, the pre-training process, the post-training where they're kind of like adapted to be able to do specific things, and they learn, what's a good output, what's a bad output, the system prompt that gives it its personality, the guardrails that tell it can and can't do things. Because the thing that you have to keep in mind is they're trained on human data, good and bad. They learn from all kinds of stuff, things that many of us might consider well beyond the boundaries of being ethical and moral. They still learn from that. And at the end of the day, they just want to do what they're asked to do. Like, they have the ability to do basically anything you could imagine, good and bad. They want to just answer your questions. They want to fulfill your prompt requests. It's humans that tell them whether or not they're allowed to do those things. And so when you look at the stuff in the Reuters article, it's almost hard to imagine the humans on the other end who are sitting there deciding the line. Like, where is it no longer okay to say something to a child? So it's okay if it says this, but not this. And then you have to figure out how to prompt the machine to know that boundary every time that someone tries to get it to do something bad. Um, it's just a really difficult thing to think about, and it's not going to go away. Like, this is going to become very prevalent. I think we're almost like kind of like in 2020 to 2022, where like we were looking out, we knew the language models were coming. You knew they were going to be able to write like humans. We wrote about it in our book in 2022, like what happens when AI can write like humans. And at the time, people hadn't experienced GPTs yet. Like, and I kind of feel like that's sort of the phase we're in right now with all of the ramifications of these models. The vast majority of the public has no idea that
Mhm.
these things are capable of doing this, that these AI characters exist, that they can do things that you wouldn't want them doing, conversations you wouldn't want them having with your kids. Most people are blissfully unaware that that's the reality we're in. And like I said, I'd love to live in the bubble and pretend like it's not. This is the world we are we are in, we are given, and we just got to kind of figure out how to deal with it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, if you were someone who is blissfully unaware of this, sorry for this segment,
Yeah.
but it is deeply important to talk about, right? Because you
Yeah.
have to have some, the term we always throw around in other contexts is like situational awareness, right? But
Yeah.
there's some to be had around this, especially if you have kids.
Yeah. And I think you gotta, I mean, there's just much, I don't want to get into this stuff right now. There's much darker sides to this, and I think you have to pick and choose your level of comfort of how far down the rabbit hole you want to go on this stuff. But I think if you have kids, especially in those teen years, you have to at least have some level of competency around these things so you can help guide them properly. We'll put a link to the KidSafe GPT. I built a GPT last summer called KidSafe GPT for parents that's designed to actually help parents sort of talk through these things, figure out these things, put some guidelines in place. And that might be a good starting point for you if like this is tough for you, you're not really sure even how to approach this with your kids. That GPT does a really nice job of just kind of helping people. And I just trained it to be like an advisor to parents to help them, figure out online safety stuff for their kids.